Welcome, everyone. My name is Sarah Ray from the Bloomfield Public Library. Thank you for joining us today, our last opera talk of the season. So I'm going to turn the mic over to you, Jeffrey, to take us away.
So, good afternoon and welcome to the Barber of Seville. Well, whenever possible, I like to begin a program with a nice fanfare. And that should be recognizable, but probably for the wrong reasons. If you did recognize it, the first thing coming to mind probably will be that masked man in a blue pajama suit on a white horse shooting bullets at some unknown assailant. And music in the background, of course, is what you just heard. It's the prelude to what's called a march, and the William Tell Overture. Second coming to mind would be that it is a William Tell Overture, and it's by Gioacchino Rossini. And it's kind of sad that, well, what they've done with that tune has had such an effect on our first thoughts about really a very, very important composer. And also, one tends to forget that it's the finale of, I think, a really terrific piece of music. The overture is 10 minutes long. It's divided into 4 different sections, each one representing a different mood. And it culminates with what is called a march. We think of it as a gallop because of that horse. And it's almost like a little symphony. It's quite extraordinary. And when you think about Rossini, this was an extremely important composer. I think a lot of people aren't aware that this was the dominant composer of Italian opera during the first half of the 19th century. You had other opera composers like Donizetti and his Lucia, and then 66 other operas, and Bellini and his Norma, but they all worked under Rossini's shadow. And that despite the fact that he stopped composing operas at the height of his career. He's in his late 30s, and in 1829, Guillaume Tell, will be his final opera. He'll continue to compose the rest of his life, but it'll be minor works for piano, for voice, either songs, duets, a little bit of sacred music, and he lives until 1868. But opera is over for him, despite the fact he's no longer writing operas, and until we have the advent of Verdi, and we'll start with his third opera, Nabucco, in 1842, and then Verdi starts to pick up steam and replaces Rossini as the dominating voice in Italian opera. It is all Rossini, and it's really mid-19th century that his reputation starts to suffer, and it's been he's had a kind of a rebirth towards the end of the 20th century. None of really the other operas, except maybe Cenerentola, have truly entered into the repertory. But during his day, he was the most influential composer of his day, the most prestigious, the wealthiest. You can just go down the list. He was number one. Extraordinary career. Now, when we go to the Barber of Seville, we have other composers that wrote operas on the same subject, and we're going to deal with one of them. They all come before Rossini, and Rossini, of course, wrote the best of them all. But we have to go to the play, and our old friend Beaumarchais, who we talked about during the presentation about the Marriage of Figaro. Marriage of Figaro was his second play. His first play was The Barber of Seville. So a very brief recap. Beaumarchais is born in 1732 in Paris and dies there in 1799. Again, this extremely colorful life. He was a playwright, wrote 5 plays. He was a musician. He played the harp, taught the harp to the 4 daughters of the king, arranged concerts for the king. This is Louis XV. also played the flute, also composed. He was a foreign agent, he was a spy, he was an arms manufacturer, he helped arm the Americans during the Revolutionary War, experienced just about everything you could in life, prison, exile, failure in the theater, success, bankruptcy. He was also a watchmaker. I forgot to leave that out, a very fine one. Was married 3 times, twice to very wealthy widows, had 1 daughter. It's quite a life. His first major success, though, on the stage will be the Barber of Seville. And he writes it in 1772, and he at first conceived of it as an opera comique. So that, what is an opera comique? And it's a little confusing because we have a opera company, theatrical company called Opera Comique, which dates from around 1715. And it would produce opera comiques, which were in essence stage works that combined instrumental and vocal music along with spoken dialogue. Sometimes the spoken dialogue replaced by recitative. I hope you remember recitative. It's kind of that talking, singing, unmelodic type of music you hear between certainly 18th century and before arias and other vocal numbers. And so his idea was to write a play with music in it. And there would be a number of songs. Some would be French, some would be Spanish. He had been to Spain on one of these diplomatic missions. And it seems that he took some of the songs he had come across there and placed them into his score for the original Figaro. Now, there was another composer. This was a violist in the orchestra of the Comédie Française. And you're probably wondering why in a theatrical company you had an orchestra, because you would have music. Not too much, but you would certainly have incidental music, orchestral music that might be played at certain moments. And you're going to have the idea then of having this opera comique. First, it's going to be presented to a theatrical company called the Comédie Italienne, which had been formed back in 1570. And it was a French version of the Commedia dell'arte, the improvised comedy that originated in Italy. And so he would present this strange play or opera comique to the Comédie Italienne, which refuses it. So he takes out some of the songs, but he does add some incidental music that will be composed by a violist in the orchestra of the Comédie Française by the name of Antoine Baudran. He was born in 1743, dies in 1834. Began as a violist, then he became a conductor at the Comédie Française, and wrote not only incidental music for new plays, but also instrumental music like 3 symphonies and 6 quartets. And apparently during his day had quite a fine reputation. And so he will contribute some music to this first, well, now it'll be a second version of Figaro. And I thought as a special treat, I would play you a tune that he wrote for the play called Je suis Lindor. Lindor being one of the characters, of course, in the original play. And Mozart wrote a set of variations on this tune. And I'm going to play you Mozart's version of the tune. We won't go into the 12 variations. And let's see, this is going to take a while to get to. Number 38. So at least you can tell your friends that you heard a work by Antoine Baudran, which is something I don't think anyone else has. And it sounds like, I hope, the following. Now, Mozart composed this set of variations in 1778, and so we know that at that point he knew about at least the first play devoted to Figaro by Beaumarchais. So, having been rejected by the Comédie Italienne, Beaumarchais in 1773 will go to the Comédie Française. He's made some changes with the music, maybe he's taken out a couple of songs, and now it is accepted, and rehearsals start right away. Unfortunately, in February of 1773, Beaumarchais is imprisoned. Very complicated situation. There was a duke, had a mistress, he dumped the mistress, and then he was very vindictive, wanted to get after everybody who had been friends of the mistress. And one of them was Beaumarchais, and apparently they got in quite a brawl, and Beaumarchais winds up in prison. He remains there until May. Rehearsals are cut off. But this became quite a scandal in Paris, and people, well, let's say word had gotten out that he had written this play, which was, in a way, autobiographical. He is Figaro. Figaro is a rogue and a rascal. Well, that's what Beaumarchais was. And Figaro in the play was a horse doctor, was a dramatist, and because of all various complications, he dumps all that and becomes a barber. It was more soothing to the soul for him. And so everybody was fascinated by the idea of this play, certainly talked up by Beaumarchais. And so the Comédie Française will mount it on February 23rd of 1775. And the first night was a fiasco. Beaumarchais, I don't know how he does this, nor the actors in the troupe, but within 48 hours makes major revisions, cuts out the last act, tightens it up. It's given a second performance. Now it's a huge hit. It gets some 25, 26 performances for the rest of the year, which was considered a very good run. Now, it is going to be translated, it's going to circulate, go to various countries, major cities. And we have the composer Giovanni Paisiello, who's going to decide to do a version of it for as an opera. And this wouldn't be too difficult to do because already it was a quasi-opera to begin with all this music that belonged to it. A few words about Paisiello, not a household name. He was born in 1740 in Taranto, not Toronto, so near Naples. Attends Naples Conservatory, and in 1764 produces a first opera, and he's going to start to have some success. Until in 1768 he signs a marriage contract. And after he signs it, he decides to renege on it. Well, his intended wife isn't going to give up, and she goes to court. And during the time that there's a court case, he's imprisoned. And when he comes out, he loses, and he has to fulfill the contract. So they get married. What a way to start a marriage. And apparently they stay married for the rest of his life until either one passes away. Unfortunately, this had a very bad effect on his reputation in Naples. And during the next 7 years, he only gets a single commission. But coming to the rescue is Catherine the Great of Russia. And in 1776, she invites him to St. Petersburg to become her court composer. Now, Catherine was a very well-educated woman. Don't forget she was German-born. And I was trying to find out, nobody really says, or at least none of my books on her say specifically that she was fluent in French. But as a young girl, her parents would make her memorize lines from Racine and Molière plays. I assume this was not in German, but in French. And when you think that later on, she would be in correspondence with the encyclopedist Diderot, who would actually go and visit her. He would sell his library to her. Again, this must have been done in French. So I'm going to say she was fluent in French. And she's going to have a performance of the Beaumarchais play, the Barber, in 1780 in St. Petersburg. And she invites Paisiello to be court composer. Now, he's going to stay there 7 years and sees how much he is attracted to the play and decides to base an opera on it, which will be produced in 1782 and will be very well received. It's performed in the Hermitage. And then it's going to start to circulate all over Europe, become extremely popular. And Paisiello is going to be at the height of his fame the last 2 decades of the 18th century. After that, his reputation diminishes. And he's going to return to Naples, where he stays basically the rest of his life, except for almost 2 years, when Napoleon, who greatly admired him, don't forget, Napoleon had very strong connections with music. He would, in fact, determine what operas could be performed at l'Opéra in Paris and which ones could not. One reason Cherubini was for a while banned from performance at l'Opéra because Napoleon didn't like him, found him too depressed, and his music was too noisy. But he's going to invite Paisiello to Paris, and he comes in 1802 and stays long enough so that he can organize the music for the great coronation of Napoleon in Notre Dame. And I think we have the painting by Jacques-Louis David, extraordinary, huge tableau, whereby we have Notre Dame and inside Napoleon about to be crowned by the Pope, and he takes the crown from the Pope and places it on his own head. Caused quite a scandal, if this is in fact true. I hope Sarah showed the I don't see it, the painting, but anyway. But he leaves before the ceremony and then returns to Naples. And then there it is. And great painting. You can see Napoleon. I don't think it helps if I point, right in the middle. And by then his career is pretty much finished. But from 1764 to 1799, he composes 87 operas. And after 1800, there are another 3, so 90 operas in total. A very prolific and successful career, but as I said, once we get past the first couple decades of the 19th century, well, he's replaced by Rossini. So I thought I would play you I think I'll wait. I'll go to Rossini first, and then I will play an excerpt from Paisiello's version. It is the entrance of Figaro, and then I'll play you the Rossini entrance, and you can definitely hear the difference in quality between the two. So we turn our attention to Rossini. Comes from a musical family. His father, Antonio, was a trumpeter and horn player, and he would marry a singer named Anna. They marry in 1791, and they have their only child in 1792, Giacchino. And he would very soon receive lessons on the horn, on the trumpet, singing lessons, composition lessons, cello lessons. And he's born in Pizarro, and just in case you're called on for Jeopardy, Pizarro is kind of northern Italy on the Adriatic coast, and it's part of a region called the Marches, and next to it is Emilia-Romagna. And it's in these two regions that the Rossini parents were circulating at the time of Rossini's birth and into the early 19th century. And the father would get gigs as a town trumpeter or a gig in a theater, actually in the same theater where his wife was singing. She was basically a second soprano, not a prima donna, but a seconda donna. Once in a while, she would get a first role. And Rossini was extremely precocious. At the age of 9, he would appear on stage singing in an opera, I presume it was a boy's role. And in 1804, so he is 12 years old, he writes a series of string quartets, 6 of them, which are really quite remarkable for a boy so young. Oddly, odd instrumentation for 2 violins, cello, and bass. And you occasionally hear them on the radio. They're kind of fun. Now, in 1804, the family settles in Bologna, much more important musical city. It had its own music school, the Liceo Musicale. Rossini will attend. And by 1805, and he's only 13, he's being called upon to be a director in theaters, a music director, maestro di cembalo, they would call it. And he'll be doing this for the next couple of years while he's also composing. But the first opera dates from 1810. It takes 2 years before it's premiered, but then he gets into this real flow. From 1810 to 1819, 30 operas. And then in 1820, he starts to have second thoughts. Well, maybe I've been doing too many too quickly. He's thinking about retirement. And then we only have 9 more operas until, or let's say including Guillaume Tell in 1829, his last opera. I should add that he was thinking of composing another opera based on Goethe's Faust, but didn't get beyond the planning stage. Guillaume Tell is the last. And there's a lot of speculation as to why he stopped composing operas. Maybe he was exhausted from all this productivity. There was a new type of opera that was coming around, grand spectacle opera, 4 or 5 act operas, huge choruses, huge disasters on stage, exploding volcanoes and heroes and heroines being thrown into cauldrons of boiling oil, you name it. And Guillaume Tell is considered a grand spectacle opera, though none of those type of things happening. And it may be that Rossini wasn't interested in doing this type of opera. Well, Guillaume Tell was quite different from his other operas. And it might have been just pure laziness. It might have been ill health. At some point, he's going to develop syphilis. Still manages to live till 68. So we don't really know. It's all pure, as I said, speculation. And so that takes us to the Barber of Seville. And this is sort of mid-career, dates from 1816. It was a commission from the Teatro Argentina in Rome. And he's going to have as a librettist one Cesare Sterbini. Sterbini, who was an official at the Vatican Treasury, and he was fluent in French, German, Latin, and Greek. Wrote some 6 libretti, and I guess other things to do, and didn't turn out a bad one for Rossini. Apparently wrote it in 12 days. And as he finished a page, he would hand it to Rossini, who would then write a bit of music for it. So there's the question of, well, how long did it take for him to compose the opera? Not much time. Get various accounts, mainly from friends of his, saying it might have been 8 days, 9 days, 13 days, 14 days. I'll go by who I consider to be the definitive biographer of Rossini, because the book is so well researched. Herbert Weinstock, even though it's old, dates from the 1970s. He says it probably was less than 3 weeks, maybe 19 days. And it was helped by the fact that he used music from previous operas and actually by previous composers. There is a theme from Haydn's Oratorio of the Seasons, another theme from Gasparo Spontini's Vestale opera. There are at least 5 works by Rossini that he took material, and of course the overture from the Barber of Seville had been used in 2 prior operas and possibly even a 3rd opera. But still, there's 600 pages of music, and it is a great work. Do that in less than 3 weeks is truly an accomplishment. So we're going to have the premiere. This will be on February 20th of 1816. One of the great fiasco premieres in the history of music. Rossini was conducting from the cembalo, from the keyboard, and everything that could go wrong went wrong. In particular, one of the characters, Don Basilio, tripped on a trap door, fell to the floor, on his face, broke his nose, was bleeding profusely, and the audience broke out in laughter. They thought it was part of the story. In fact, they were trying to beat him so he would do it again. Then in the finale of Act 1, which we'll hear to conclude the program, great finale, apparently a black cat ran on stage in Figaro, and I'm not quite sure if he was singing while he carried it off, or he carried it off and no one was singing his part, took it off stage. It only ran back on stage and this time jumped into the arms of another character, Dr. Bartolo. In terms of the audience, you still had people who thought that Paisiello's work was a classic, and how dare Rossini attempt to write an opera based on the same work. Weinstock does say that Rossini contacted Paisiello and said, I would like to write a version of the Barber of Seville. I'll give it a different title out of deference to you, called it Almaviva. It won't be at all like your opera. I'm going to make many changes in it. And it seems that Paisiello gave his okay. Later writers think this is more apocryphal than anything else. Again, I'm sticking with Weinstock. And so the hall was full of Paisiello admirers who were determined to make the opera a failure. And they booed and they hissed and there were catcalls. And Rossini almost had a stroke, went back to his hotel, was under contract to conduct all the performances, refused to conduct the second performance. But at the second performance, it wasn't the same audience. The Paisiello fans had done their thing and left, and now you had the regular public in, and it was well received. It only received 7 performances, and it'll be another 5 years before the opera is performed again in Rome. But there'll be a revival around September of that same year, and this is when it'll be called now the Barber of Seville instead of Almaviva. Paisiello had died in June, so I guess Rossini felt comfortable changing the title. And in Bologna it had a great success, and now it starts to spread all over Europe, goes to London in 1818. We'll come to the Met, its initial season of 1883. It'll be the 11th different opera performed there. And from 1883 till 1987, it's received some 279 performances over the course of 55 seasons. That makes it almost every other year being performed. So it is a very popular opera. I would think it and The Marriage of Figaro of Mozart are the two most popular comic operas. Not operettas. So, as promised, I said I would play you an excerpt from Paisiello's. This is the entrance of Figaro. Give you an idea of what the music is like. And then I'll play you 2 versions of Figaro's entrance in Rossini's opera. 2 completely different versions. But first, a little bit of Paisiello.
Un'altra villaggia però di buon umore, ma però di buon umore. D'ogni evento superior, d'ogni evento superior, d'ogni evento superior, d'ogni evento superior.
It does go on. I'm just playing you a bit. And, no, it's not going to set the world on fire. Then we come to Rossini. And I'll play you, as I said, two versions. And really, this is one of the great entrances in all of opera. What a way for your primary character to come on stage. And try to think of the differences between the two in terms of high notes, maybe, in terms of speed, in terms of added notes, different uses of the voice. I will say, with this version, very nicely sung. I'll tell you singing afterwards. It's conventional. And then the second one, well, quite different. So here's number one, an aria you will all recognize.
Per Barbiere di qualità, di qualità. Bravo Figaro, bravo, bravissimo, bravo. La 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 la. Fortunatissimo per verità, bravo. La 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 la. Fortunatissimo per verità, fortunatissimo per verità. La 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 la. Pronto a far tutto la notte e il giorno, sempre intorno in cielo sta, mille cucaglie per un barbiere, vita più nobile ma non si dà. Tra la 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 la. Rasori e pettini, lanceti forbici a mio comando, tutto qui sta. Rasori e pettini, lanceti forbici a mio comando, tutto qui sta. Vela risorsa, poi del mestiere, con la donnetta, col cavaliere, con la donnetta, tra la la lera, col cavaliere, tra la 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 la. Che bel vivere, che bel piacere, che bel piacere per un barbiere di qualità, di qualità. Tutti mi chiedono, tutti mi vogliono, donne e ragazzi, vecchie fanciulle, qua la parrucca, presto la barba, qua la sanguigna, presto il biglietto, tutti mi chiedono, tutti mi vogliono, tutti mi chiedono, tutti mi vogliono, qua la parrucca, presto la barba, presto il biglietto, e Figaro, 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 che furia, ahimè, che falla, una alla volta, per carità, per carità, per carità, una alla volta, una alla volta, una alla volta, per carità. Figaro, son qua. Ehi, Figaro! Son qua, Figaro qua, Figaro là, Figaro qua, Figaro là, Figaro su, Figaro giù, Figaro su, Figaro giù. Pronto, prontissimo, sol come i fulmini, sono fantasma della città, della città, della città, della città, della città. Apro Figaro, bravo, bravissimo, apro Figaro, bravo, bravissimo, fortunatissimo, 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 per verità. Tra la 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 la. Antifortuna, antifortuna, antifortuna non cherrà. Sono infantato della città, sono infantato della città, della città, della città, della città.
Well, that was sung by Hermann Prey, very fine German baritone. I don't know if really well suited for this type of singing. A little bit out of tune in one spot. Doesn't have the great flexibility. And then you can compare it to this version, which I call the nut version, which it's great fun. And here we go.
Sempre d'intorno l'ingino sta, mi del cuccagno per un barbiere di più nobile non si dà. La 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 la. Rasoni e pendolo, lanceti forbici al mio comando, tutto qui sta. Rasoni e pendolo, lanceti forbici al mio comando, tutto qui sta. Ve la risorsa, poi del mestiere, con la donnetta, col cavaliere, e con la donnetta, la 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 la, col cavaliere, la 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 la. Che bel vivere, che bel piacere, che bel piacere. Per un barbiere è di qualità, di qualità. Tutti mi chiedono, tutti mi vogliono, donne e ragazzi, vecchi fanciulle, qua la parrucca, presto la barba, qua la spugna, presto mi chiedono, tutti mi chiedono, tutti mi vogliono, tutti mi chiedono, tutti mi vogliono, qua la parrucca, presto la barba, presto mi chiedono, hey! Figaro, 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 Figaro. Figaro, 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 Figaro. Ahimè, ahimè, e gioia, ahimè, e voglia, una alla volta, per carità, per carità, per carità. Uno alla volta, uno alla volta, uno alla volta, per carità. E Figaro, son qua, Figaro, son qua, Figaro là, Figaro là, Figaro là, Figaro là, Figaro su, Figaro giù, Figaro su, Figaro giù. La battissima sotto le furie, sulla fretta, la recita, la recita, la recita, la recita, la recita. Apro Figaro, apro bellissima, apro Figaro, apro bellissima, te fortuna, mancherà. Apro Figaro, apro bellissima, apro Figaro, apro bellissima, te fortuna, mancherà. Sono il peccato, la città, sono il peccato, la città, la città, la città.
Now, there's some purists who might not like that version. There's so much thrown into it, though it doesn't distort the aria, which you're going to have in my next example. That's Cheryl Milnes, really at the height of his career. His voice was terrific at that point. And the flexibility and the different ways of using it, the falsetto and whatever. And I always find amazing, you can't shut him up at the end. Instead of singing the final verses just once, he sings it twice and extremely fast. And then when the orchestra has its ending, he's still singing la 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 la, and there's nothing in the score saying he should do that. I saw him do this on stage years ago, and it was phenomenal. He was running around the stage singing this. He whistles, as you heard. It was quite the performance. Anyway, I want to compare now the great aria of Rosina. Originally this was supposed to be a mezzo-soprano role, and now sopranos sing it. Two completely different versions. The first one, again, will be the more conventional one, and I should add at this point, the one that Rossini probably would have preferred. And then you got the second one, which is quite something. But anyway, we'll play, here's number one. I'll tell you afterwards who's singing. And this is Una voce poco fa. So that was Bubbles, or better known as Beverly Sills. And as I said, this is a more conservative version, one that Rossini would have approved of. For the purists, might be offended by this next version, but pay attention to the vocal technique and everything that the singer does. It's remarkable. I mean, the singing is just... I've never heard anything like it. And I've played arias sung by the soprano before, and I'm a great fan. But this is remarkable singing, whether you believe this is being true to the aria or not. obviously a live performance, and that thundering noise you hear, people stomping their feet, something you do in Europe but you don't do in America. The soprano was Edita Gruberova, who we've listened to several times before. Whether you like this type of interpretation or not, the singing is unbelievable. What this woman could do with her voice in a live performance is just, it's mind-blowing. Never heard anyone sing like this. Just staggering. But had she sung this for Rossini, he probably would have had a stroke. And there is a story of a young Adelina Patti, who was one of the great sopranos of the mid to late 19th century. And Rossini was famous for having his soirée musicale at his house. He would invite singers and instrumentalists to play. Saint-Saëns was one of his resident pianist accompanists. And she decided to make an impression on Rossini. She was still quite young. And she sang the same aria for him. And she threw in every possible high note and trill, everything imaginable, and did it perfectly. And then was all beaming and turned to Rossini and, well, what did you think, maestro? He said, well, that was extraordinary, but could you please tell me the name of the composer? So I'm sure he wouldn't have taken to Gruberova's interpretation, but you do have to admire the voice. Just the quality of the voice is stunning. It's a flawless voice. And then all the technique that she possessed. Anyway, to end, we'll play the finale. Have to have a festive ending to this. The finale to Act 1. This is the James Levine recording, and taken at quite a pace. And you've got all the characters on stage. And think of the black cat jumping in someone's lap during it. And here we go. Finale to Act 1. Oh, yes, I always forget to say, the best part of this is the piccolo. Listen to the piccolo when it comes in. Great fun.
Oh! Angelo poverello già studito sbalordito non ragiona si confonde si riduce di pozzare Angelo poverello già studito sbalordito non ragiona si confonde si riduce di
What a great way to end an act. So that's the Barber of Seville. I don't know if there are any questions.